Home Alone was a topic for Season 1 of the EPS Podcast last year, but honestly, as my guest Shay agrees, one could devote several podcasts and even college courses to the story and still have more to say. Take a listen to what Shay and I discussed about the 1990 movie after she volunteered to talk about it at a recent podcast karaoke event held at Loaded Question Brewing in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. All right, so I am sitting down with Shay, and we're going to talk some Home Alone.
Yeah, we are.
Because, and I'm pretty sure that there are probably, you could teach a college class on Home Alone, probably, from so many different viewpoints.
I would love to, actually.
Before we get started on the original Home Alone, are you a fan of any of the sequels?
I think I had a hard time relating. I feel like they were maybe a little forced.
Yeah. I think especially the third one, indeed. But
exactly. No, I think the first one just opened up so many doors to so many thought processes that no. I think the first one was enough.
And the first one is really the only one that's kind of plausible. Like if that happened in my family, we wouldn't go on vacation for another 10 years. And if we did, we would pack Kevin in our luggage so that there would be no mishaps.
Would you put him in the overhead and or would you check him with the dogs underneath, would he get an actual
I think
ticket?
What I would probably do is strap him to my back like a backpack if I had to go. But that's what's so.
Except now I just traveled to Vietnam. Now the backpacks have to go under your front
seat. So Kevin is doomed to be left home or sent off to New York.
He loves it.
I think he secretly is self-sabotaging. So that's
what I'm saying.
That's where we're going with this. All right. So the question that I selected for us to talk about is, what material is this made from? And when I ask that question, a lot of times, especially with the more traditional primary source of an old newspaper or something, it's obvious: paper and ink. And in this case, a movie is made out of a script and a director and actors and all that stuff. And I don't know what they make film out of. I think it's naturally occurring, but the film tree and they just take it somewhere in Rochester, New York, a Kodak plant. They make the film. I don't know. That's the physical material of the film. But when it comes to the actual story, they didn't have to look far in 1989 to come up with that story, did they?
No, your mother left you at the mall or left you in the grocery store. I have 5 older brothers. Mm-hmm. It was not a weird thing to suddenly be I've been left.
Yeah. And not viciously.
No.
Not because
there were too many to count.
Right.
There were too many to actually care about. Honestly, you show up to the grocery store with 5 kids, you're stoked if you leave with 3.
Right. You did well.
Yeah.
That time.
Honestly.
Oh, and you could also, and I remember, my family, there's only 2 children,
there weren't enough. You're not gonna.
Maybe there was more before me. I don't know.
Oh,
but the idea was we could be used at a grocery store, for example, to be deployed. We'd be like, all right, we need this from aisle 7. You go get it. And there was a lot more trust involved. And then on top of that, I would walk to school and walk home again from a pretty young age.
I would too. Have you noticed the way school bus stops work now?
It's less than a mile from the school.
It's every driveway they stop at.
Yeah.
We literally had to walk at least a half a mile and share a stop for the bus to come pick us up. Now they stop at every driveway.
Yeah.
Come on, make
I think a lot of it, it's funny, this sounds very conceited, but I was in Ireland this summer, and I was having a conversation. First of all, have you ever been to Ireland?
I have.
The airport in Dublin serves beer at every gate.
So does London Heathrow.
That's right, because it's not.
Yeah.
And I was.
You have to be 12 drinking.
Like there's like and that's was.
you have to see over the bar.
I had a conversation with another American while I was getting my beer pre-flight, and it wasn't even that late in the day. I was just like, yeah, I give it. And she was like, and I was saying how there's so many pubs. Everywhere.
They're everywhere.
And she's like, I wish we had that in America. We don't really have that in America. And I said, well, our infrastructure is not really built for it because Dublin is an ancient city. It's been around for centuries. There's been a long, long time where people would pretty much live their entire lives in one neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that was their place to go drink. I didn't say all of this and bore her at the airport terminal. Speaking of Home Alone, airports and stuff. And see, that would have made more sense if the parents were having beers and they're like, oh yeah, that kid.
Sure.
For the second one anyway. The first one never happened before. It's justifiable. The second one, they should have incorporated but as I was thinking about it, I'm like, but in America, the country, really the only part of the country that would make sense to have pubs on every corner would be here on the East Coast.
It would be Boston.
Yeah, which kind of does.
Which is funny because we had Prohibition.
Right.
So, but honestly, no, it would make the only sense.
So that's a lot of the reason why kids, the buses are stopping everywhere because there's sidewalks. There's no sidewalk. It's all just roads, and so there's a lot more of that. But in the 80s, and when this movie's coming out, not only is there a lot of kids having to kind of fend for themselves.
I woke up every morning on my own, and my dad would leave me a donut and a little glass of milk.
Oh, that's kind of sweet.
So I would eat a donut, and I would drink milk while watching Fraggle Rock.
That's a good combination.
I would walk to school, and then I would walk home after school and hope my dad got out of work on time.
Yeah.
Because if he didn't, I was eating chicken patties in the toaster for dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. It was very different.
And that was not unusual. That was not unique. There was a lot of kids that lived like that.
Kid.
And that's
100%.
That's exactly why this movie was made, and that's why.
And honestly, that movie made me so much more comfortable being a latchkey kid.
It's like, well, I have these micro machines, so I'll set them up by the staircase, and then these old paint cans.
Except I didn't have a gorgeous house that had the utilities on all the time, and
so that's
that people would actually want to
That's
rob.
another layer to that movie. Of course, you need to have a house that's worthy of robbing, or else the robbers wouldn't have a reason to be scoping it out. No story, right? It would be a pretty dull story if there wasn't that threat of intruders, right?
Woods, honestly.
So not a good, heartwarming Christmas story to be there.
No.
Which is funny because I think, and I've seen this happen a few times, you can take Home Alone, and if you splice it just right, it kind of looks like The Bad Son, which is another Macaulay Culkin movie. Which they filmed part of that right here in Portsmouth at the old Air Force Base.
And honestly, Macaulay Culkin is, if you ask me, just
the Good Son. Excuse me, the Good Son.
Meant to be like that nasty bad guy.
He plays that role so well.
He's creepy. Like by nature, just
he has
super
that
creepy.
Look to him. And
he's gaunt and pale.
Yeah, now it's
there's a lot.
Nobody saw that when he was on top of the world because of this movie, because he represented an entire generation. He represented our generation.
I mean, but come on, you could see that kid left home alone in that house. He was so underfed compared to the rest of those kids.
Yeah, well, look at how many kids were eating ahead of him. I mean, so that movie, you were mentioning before, like you kind of fantasized about what you would do in that situation. I don't know about you, but that movie still to this day makes me want cheese pizza, a plain cheese pizza, piping hot, like nothing else. Like there's just something about that scene when he finally gets, after his trickery, his cheese pizza, and he goes, a lovely cheese pizza just for me. That represents the whole fantasy for kids at that time, doesn't it?
Makes me want to become friends with the village weirdo.
Old Man Marley, who for some reason doesn't get mentioned at all in the next movie. Like,
but for me, like, moral of the story, like, trust the weirdo.
Yeah. I think that's what's so wonderful about that original movie is because it has so many layers, like you said.
Oh, absolutely.
And one of them is don't judge a book by its cover.
Yep.
I kind of want to know more about Old Man Marley.
Oh.
It goes back to, I have this like desire to one day make a TV series which gives backstories to like secondary characters.
Oh, I love
and
that.
you don't know who they are until the end scene. It's not until the final scene you're like, that's Old Man Marley. You know, like he's some old guy having a fight with his son, and you know you're like, oh, you know, this is so sad. And then at the end you're like, you see him like shoveling, and you're like, it's Old Man Marley. Oh my God. And you know you could guess, you know, as he went along, like, I wonder what this is. Is this Terminator?
I mean, because you can.
Nope. Wouldn't that be a good show, though?
It really would. It really would. Yeah, I'm down with that.
So as you've gotten older, you kind of look at it through Marv and Harry's point of view.
A little.
And like, and I think a lot of people kind of feel for them in a certain way, in that not that what they're doing is right by any means, they're criminals, but that they're just kind of like, they've gone into this far that after a while they don't even care about robbing the house.
Yeah, no.
They're just so mad. And that kind of speaks to the same time period too, because you know, for all the prosperity of the 1980s, for all of the wealth that was being generated and the, you know, good, you know, return of family values and stuff, there was still a kind of festering underbelly of people without, and represented by those guys.
And you almost, you know, sometimes you naturally, even if you don't mean to, you feel bad for that underdog.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, I get it.
Did you watch the new Home Alone that came out last year?
No.
Join the club. Nobody did, but it was, I saw half a minute of it. I hated it almost immediately because it was just so, it didn't have that heart that the original one did. From the get-go, it just looked like any other movie, but they role reverse it. So like the conflict in it is that there's a kid home alone,
Yeah.
but he's a jerk, and he has, through his jerk ways, stolen a like super valuable rare toy from two perfectly nice people who are, you know, kind of on hard times, and they could really use that. They want to eBay the toy and get some cash to buy presents for their kids. So they become the burglars. And it's Ellie Kemper plays one of them, you know, Kimmy Schmidt.
It's gonna tug at my heartstrings.
And so you don't feel like angry at them. You actually, and so it's the same premise. They're trying to sneak into this kid's house to get their property back that he stole, and he has all these toys and trinkets and the traps for them, and he's shooting stuff at them, and you're ending up like, oh, these poor people. Like,
see, yeah.
With Marv and Harry, you're like, they
I don't
set them
know
up as real bad guys, and so you're like, you don't feel bad for them as they're terrorizing this kid. We have a Home Alone movie for every 5 to 6 years nowadays.
We have one for just about like any generation.
But they all don't. Only the first one really works, because
That's what I'm
the
saying.
phone line gets knocked down. I mean, nowadays, just like, hey, are you okay? Or text.
Oh, it doesn't work. It
So-
doesn't work. If your parents get lost on an airline tomorrow,
Yeah.
you're not going to wait a week and a half
No.
to hear from them again.
You can FaceTime them or, Zoom
Exactly.
later that day.
We
Like
just
right now, we're like,
We just went to Vietnam.
Right.
We were able to use FaceTime on the airplane.
It's this whole other country.
Yeah, like there is no reason that my parents were going to go to London for Christmas and I'm not going to hear
Yeah.
from them for 11 days.
Isn't that wild, though, that the movie became completely, you could poke holes into the entire material of the film within 4 to 5 years because the internet became commercialized about 2 years after that movie came out. And while it wasn't universally used, it would have helped a lot. I'm sure a house like Kevin's was the first one to have dial up as he's trying to get online and all the noises of AOL Instant Messenger.
How much money Kevin's parents?
And they never really explained what the book.
They do
Oh,
for
that
money,
so you chose the actual book,
But
which that has a whole backstory in it.
it was a book.
The book is, and my family, we didn't have a lot of disposable income.
No,
growing up,
we didn't have
I remember we came home. It was probably just around this time of the year that we came home from.
Oh my God, this is an actual book.
Yeah, it's Scholastic, and it was the subject of a full-length podcast last year, where I talked about the book itself. And I remember vividly because we came home from being out and we turned on the TV and there was the trailer for Home Alone. And my dad was laughing hysterically watching this kid run around the house and going, yes, yes,
Yeah.
Shooting the bad guys and running like crazy. And he thought it looked fantastic, but we didn't have the time or the money to go see the movie in the theater. Meanwhile, I'm being taunted by the commercials that came on as the movie came out. Because remember those commercials? The kid's like, I've seen Home Alone 17 times. I've seen Home Alone 145 times. Like they don't go to school anymore. I remember hearing about theaters.
Don't go to school.
The theaters had standing room only for Home Alone. Standing room only for that movie.
Yeah.
Fire hazards for that movie. For just Home Alone. And I wasn't able to see it in the theater. I never saw it in the theater.
Yeah.
But what I did have was the Scholastic Book Fair. And so I was like Bart Simpson in that episode with Itchy and Scratchy movie. You're going to spit it out, aren't you?
Okay.
I'm the nerd sitting there reading about, but just like the
Brought in. Okay.
just like the book for the movie Hook, it has so much backstory. It's so interesting. Like there's so much to it that like Kevin's mom is a fashion designer. That's why she has all those mannequins and stuff. That's why she has all those mannequins. And like downstairs in the book, the basement has much more stuff going on because there's mannequins in the basement.
We've got.
That's why he's so creeped out by the basement.
We've got okay, but a fashion designer also explains why Kevin's mom was just even on the airplane.
Dressed to the nines,
pads,
yeah.
Like nylons,
Yep.
stilettos.
Dressed to the nines, going to Paris. I'm sure she was going to do some business while there.
Well, hot damn.
I don't know I don't know if they ever mention what the dad does, but
Well,
fishing apparently because he has the fishing hooks, and so he's a commercial fisherman on Lake Michigan out of Chicago, and fashion designer, and they live it up. What's wonderful about that though is that the actual location that they filmed it in stays pretty true. Like I've never been to Chicago, but I understand that if you go to the McCallister house, around the block is the church that he goes to.
Really?
Around the next block, 'cause a lot of times the movies, like have you ever seen the Mighty Ducks 2?
I've seen all the Mighty.
So you know the beginning of Mighty Ducks 2, right? Where they go skating all over Minneapolis. Somebody actually mapped that out, and they said if you count all the landmarks are, they ride like something like 30 miles of going around on the rollerblades.
That's too much.
And like it's not very accurate. But this one is actually like
that is so
they
funny.
utilize the so that's more material actually. It's like a legitimate. It's set where it says it's set. It's not like filmed one place and set somewhere else.
Wait.
This gesture, this is how we got started on this actually. This gesture. Tell me about what you know about this gesture of the
So, come to find out, when he did the scene where he put on that aftershave,
Yeah.
he was supposed to smack and then like let go and not have that continued reaction. But he actually smacked it on and was like, this burns.
It's an
this
actual
fluff burns. And that was his like real reaction was like, oh!
So that's like the ultimate way to bring this on home because Macaulay Culkin was selected for that part because of what he played in Uncle Buck.
I know. Oh my god!
And he was super cute, Uncle Buck, and sassy and all that stuff, and like total like child actor of his era.
Cutie patootie.
So cute, And then
I'm quoting
only. Isn't that so funny how an accident? Turns into the icon of the decade. That everybody's doing that.
Also, look what happens when you let someone run with something and accept it.
Right.
Because that was not scripted. He did it, and they were like, we're keeping it.
I was watching a thing about Planes, Trains, and Automobiles last night, another John Hughes movie. And I guess John Hughes, and this is also something very time period appropriate, he intentionally would film lots more material than he expected to use in his movies for the purpose of just letting his actors do what they want, but he wanted them to be able to, so he would make VHS copies of all the extended material so that they could then use it for their demo reels to get more parts. So he was like totally looking out for his actors because he understood how hard they were working.
Have you ever heard Jerry Seinfeld talk about when actually filming Seinfeld?
No. I've heard him talk about
a lot of it is for the same reason.
Because
they just let each other go off for the understanding that go use it elsewhere.
It's awesome. And it's like that overdoing it almost. Not like, but like making sure your cup runs over.
Just run with it.
That's what makes it so great because
do what feels right and go with it.
And I feel like they overdid that probably about 10 to 12 years later in the early 2000s. Remember all those movies that they had, and they were totally doing it to not for that reason. They were doing it to fill the DVD special features so that they could say special, blooper reel, and it was all either bloopers or after a while they were trying to. It was all improv stuff. They were trying to get lines.
I feel like it's honestly something that we're missing now is just letting someone go with what feels right. Editing. Like
that we've lost that era, that early 90s era of comedy movies was so good because they were excellent stories on their own.
Yep.
Like I said, The Good Son is basically Home Alone from a different angle.
Oh, no shit.
Maniacal kid that's like, torturing people. And, but has some funny stuff in it. My Cousin Vinny, another Joe Pesci movie, same time period. Fantastic story. I would watch that as a drama.
So good.
But just made that much better because they insert the funny stuff as they go.
And how much of that do you think was off script? That they allowed, or I don't know.
I wonder if this to bring it back to your first point about Home Alone being based on latchkey kids and just, I wonder if there was therefore more within just society at large. Just more trust in each other, like that we were a civil society, we would be able to.
I have a 13-year-old daughter, and And I 100% think that I was trusted more as a 13-year-old than I trust my 13-year-old
Yeah.
now.
And it's not even so much about them either. It's about kind of the society at large.
It's about Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, and it's about society as a whole, honestly.
So, because that's what makes Marv and Harry the misfits. They're the outcasts. They don't fit in. They're the opposite of everybody else. The vast majority.
But yet, how many people walked away feeling bad for them? You know?
Maybe on the fourth or fifth viewing, this year I might. I don't like seeing them rampage through houses and just taking stuff.
But
think about like John Candy's character.
Yeah.
He helps out a total stranger.
Exactly.
He doesn't want anything in return. He just does it all for.
It was a
different era.
Kind of a Robin Hood.
Yeah. Gus Volinsky, Polka King of the Midwest.
Exactly. Yeah.
Polka. Damahushi Polka? Kiss Me Polka? AKA Kiss Me. I've had a blast talking to you about Home Alone.
I've been having a blast too. I could talk to you about movies all night.
Well, I'll tell you. All right. Thank you again for doing this.
Of course. Thank you.
We're exactly halfway through Season 2 of the EPS Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed listening to what you've heard so far. Short episodes like this one, which are products of my EPS Podcast live exhibits, have been coming out on Tuesdays this season, while longer episodes, deeper dives into subjects, are posted on Thursdays. We'll be taking a break from posting new episodes by the end of the month, but you can still follow the podcast on social media, especially Instagram and on YouTube. I look forward to you tuning in again to the EPS Podcast, where everything is a primary source.